Hi there, guys, and welcome to the channel. And today we're doing a Zoom meeting with some of the patrons on the site. So if you want to become a patron, have a look in the description below. You can join us here on Zoom. Today we're going to talk about Baba Vanga. So, with all the troubles that are going on at the moment, we're talking today on the 21st of September 2022. And all sorts of problems are happening at the moment with Vladimir Putin, potential nuclear war being talked about in the press, and on Putin's recent speech, threats being made to the West, and all sorts of troublesome thoughts out there over this Ukraine business. And I'm going to talk today about some of the Russian predictions by a Bulgarian psychic called Baba Vanga. Now, she was a blind mystic, an amazingly strange-looking lady who died in 1996. She died at the age of 85, and in Bulgaria was known as the Nostradamus of the Balkans. So she had some very interesting things to say about the future of Russia. And I wonder whether in some of that is perhaps a few clues to what's going on now in Russia. And perhaps I wonder too if Vladimir Putin has not picked up somewhere along the line these predictions, maybe even has them in the back of his mind, and is kind of making the future come true in what he sees in his mind's eye. Right now, I don't believe for a minute that we're going to be on a World War III. So don't get worried by the things that Baba Vanga says. I've got my own thoughts, which I will put in a new video again about Putin again in Russia. And I've said a number of things about Putin and about this crisis at the moment. Well, kind of a crisis at the moment. But what we have is him threatening to, I really will use nuclear bombs if I need to. And I'm going to get another 300,000 troops here recruited from Russia. It's all going to pour into Ukraine, and he's desperate to win this war, isn't he? So he's a bit of a troublesome person at the moment. But this is what Baba Vanga said about some of the things in Russia. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about her first, because she's Bulgarian. She was Bulgarian. Like I said, she died in 1996. But many of the Russian leaders sought her advice. Strangely enough, Brezhnev, who was a pretty sort of wooden sort of character as far as I remember him, went and saw her and spoke to her, and she said a number of things about his presidency. Yeltsin also went to see her, and she said about his presidency and all what would happen with Yeltsin. And Gorbachev too, although Gorbachev denies it, denied because he passed Gorbachev, great man. But I remember at the time when it all happened in Psychic News, there was a whole page reports and things talking about Gorbachev going to see the blind psychic and things like that. So there was lots of news reports at the time that seemed pretty credible to me at the time as well. So she's well respected. Many famous people went to see her as well. And she even predicted Stalin's death, and as well as her own. But you don't go predicting Stalin's death. He was very interested in psychic things. He was very interested in a Russian psychic called Wolf Messing, who did some amazing sort of things. But you don't predict Stalin's death. So she was very well respected. I'm surprised she didn't get the chop early in her career because of the things she said. But some of her predictions do get kind of a bit distorted out on the internet. Like so many things do. Nostradamus gets distorted. Even some of the stuff I say gets a bit distorted out there sometimes too. But you can kind of sometimes, with someone like Baba Vanga, read things into it. We all like to become the sleuths to try to understand what does she really mean, And of course the newspapers love it. But I'm just going to put a few of the things that she allegedly seemed to predict. 9/11, she seemed to get some pretty close things she said about 9/11. She talked about America being attacked by steel birds. And, of course, the two aeroplanes could be seen as the steel birds, couldn't they? And she talked about innocent blood gushing, which was true. I mean, innocents died. I don't know about blood gushing, but innocents died. And she talked at the same time in that prediction about wolves howling in the bush. And I think, well, that's a bit odd. But then it was President Bush, wasn't it, at the time? when that happened. So, that was picked up as a very important prediction of hers. She said also about the Kursk disaster. That was when the submarine, the Kursk, went down. And big problem at the time. But a lot of her close followers said, no, she didn't make that prediction. The people closer were saying, well, the press were picking up on this thing, and also the KGB were picking up on some of the things, because a lot of the things she said were very useful for the glories of Russia, So just as we get things distorted on the internet nowadays, so too many of her predictions were being distorted. If you have any thoughts about this, a lot about it, put it in the description, but in the comments below, please, folks. Let's hear what you have to say, because there's an awful lot of things that are contentious, but then there's also a lot of things happen. What things do you think really she really got right? But she certainly seemed to have. That Kursk went down in the Barents Sea, So look it up and you compare her predictions to it. It was pretty interesting. Of course, Kursk is also a city. She talks about the city of Kursk being destroyed. That's one of the things that her close followers said about. She is also supposed to have said about that the last president would be black, and people were predicting at the time about Obama. And that the 44th president, she said, would be black, and she got that right. And then she said that one set of predictions said that was the last president, and people were saying, oh, Trump's not a real president, therefore he couldn't be the next president after Obama. So there's a lot of contention about that prediction. But other predictions of hers, this is why they get a bit contradictory sometimes, I have to say. Other predictions of hers said that there would be a Messiah type of figure that would become the leader of America. And many people saw Donald Trump as a Messiah type of figure, almost a religious sort of figure, And she said that he would be in control of America at a time when... I'm just looking for my notes here. She said, let's get it exactly. She says, when America faced a crisis that would eventually bring the country down. Now, the country didn't come down while Trump was in charge. Maybe it's coming down now. Maybe Trump comes back again to try to stop the country falling into a disrepair and into conflict. She talked also about the division in America and things like that. So there's a lot of fascinating things in what she has to say, and maybe the timing gets wrong. She also talked about a nuclear war that would happen in what she said was going to be in 2010, and of course that didn't happen. She talked about the destruction of Europe. She talked about the Arabs would use, the Arabic countries would use chemical warfare against Europe and leave it devastated. Those things haven't happened. Hopefully she's wrong. I think she is wrong, but and many of these things, as I said, were distorted. Make good headlines, don't they? They're clickbait, I suppose I'm a bit guilty even just talking about Baba Vanga, because it's, people think you're interested in this topic. But we're going to talk about this in a moment a little bit more with my guests here with me tonight on Zoom. Now, she also talked about the assassination of Indira Gandhi. She also spoke about her own death and even predicted that. So what did she say about Russia? And in the last part of her life, she spoke about Vladimir Putin. And she said that one day that Russia would dominate the world. She said that there would be the leadership of Vladimir Putin. And I've got a quote here. In 1979, she had an interview with, I think it was a journalist called Valentin Sidorov. Right, and this is what is quoted as she said: "All will thaw as if ice, only one remains untouched, Vladimir's glory of Russia." So, and then she went on to say, "Too much is brought in a victim. Nobody can stop Russia. All will be removed by her from the way, and not only will be kept, but also becomes the Lord of the world." Now, she does kind of speak a bit in riddles here, doesn't she? But what we're basically seeing here is kind of a prediction about the glory of Russia. Obviously, she's Bulgarian. She became very, very popular within Russia. And as I said, I think sometimes the Soviets were kind of using her predictions a little bit for propaganda purposes. That's my thoughts. I personally don't feel that Russia is going to come to this high position of power. And I don't think Putin is going to come to a position where he will become some great figure like she's described here. You've seen my predictions, I expect, about Putin already on this channel. I feel that they're going to take him out, ultimately. He's not going to succeed. I feel also the Ukrainians, despite all these 300,000 troops, are still going to be victorious. And I don't think Russia will use nuclear bombs in this conflict. They won't let him. His own people won't let him. And I think Putin is on the way out. He's got to win this war. That's why he's being so aggressive with it. But he can't win this war, I feel. So those are my thoughts anyway. And I'm obviously going to do more stuff about this in the coming weeks and months ahead, because it's obviously going to be going to be an important issue that we want to talk about. But we're going to move over now to my guests with me today on Zoom. And we're going to have a little discussion, not just about this, but about the whole nature of how can we see the future, and can we always get it right? Can we time it properly? And what's going to happen in the months and years ahead? Okay, over to my guests. You've heard what I've had to say. Let's have a chat about what you think about some of these implications of what Baba Vanga says about Russia, about the future of the world, and what do you think about the situation we're in here with the this whole situation in Russia at the moment?
I don't think the West would allow Russia to crush everybody like that and just, take over the whole world. I mean, Hitler tried it, didn't he? And he wasn't very successful.
I think he'd have a bit of a difficulty.
Yeah, I think he would. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I don't know. I've got a feeling this is the media, blowing things up. You know what they're like. They just change every story, don't they?
Yeah, I think Baba Vanga's one of those that's been kind of used, hasn't she?
Yeah, she has. Yes.
She's been used because I mean, she makes a great headline, and I suppose I'm just as much at fault here, I suppose, by picking up on Baba Vanga actually.
Well, yeah.
But I do see it out there, all sorts of things. Baba blind prophet sees this and sees that. Right.
But is it actually possible to get the timings of predictions right, do you think? Given the strange nature of time, we treat time as linear, but it's not really linear, is it?
Well, I think I wonder sometimes, even whether, we see things, but I wonder if prophets can only see things in their own lifetime. I mean, I've read some interesting sort of thoughts about people who say things, for example, that everything is eternal recurrence, and that we run through the same situation time and time again, over and over again, in a sort of loop, and it changes slightly every time. Yeah. So we can get glimpses of what's ahead because we've lived it once before in one alternative reality, and then we come to the same point and change it slightly for the next alternative reality. It's a bit sci-fi, but for that reason, we can only ever see within the length of our own lifetime. Which is
people say history repeats itself, don't they?
Yeah.
Everything.
I mean, when you look at a lot of the predictions, the psychics and things. I mean, Nostradamus in his lifetime got massive of things right, as did Baba Vanga. She got masses of things right. And what was the name of Sylvia? What was it? Sylvia Brown. Got nothing much right in her lifetime, but then she got something after her death. She accurately predicted the coronavirus in one of her books.
Yes, that's
I thought,
right.
blimey, she never got anything right, because I used to know other psychics that used to laugh about her. And yet she got something massively right in one of her books, about the future of the world, and got the date right and everything,
Yeah, but if somebody says something's going to happen in 2010, I mean, in the spirit world, that would be meaningless, surely.
I agree with.
Yeah.
I think, and it's the same when I do things. People, of course, everybody wants to know what's going to happen in 2022, what's going to happen in
Yes. Yeah.
2023,
Yeah.
and so you kind of have to try, if you're making predictions, to try to focus on the dates you've been given. But you might see something, and it might not be for that then. It might
No.
be 2 or 3 years down the line, but you've
Yeah.
seen something really specific, you know, and then it happens in the specific way, and you think, well, I'm 2 years out, but it
Yes.
don't look right. People, they say, oh, he got
No.
it all wrong, but it's like the things you see, like people knocked me when Trump wasn't elected second term, because
Oh,
but maybe he's going to be the third term,
he might be. Yes,
and
he
what I
might well
saw was
be.
the third term,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you don't know often. And it's the same even with the nadis, they kind of tell you something's going to happen, and I often wonder if that timeline might change depending what actions I've taken beforehand.
Oh, it could do.
Because if
Yeah.
I do remedies or do good
But
things in my life that are going to make better karma for myself, then the whole agenda might shift or might even
yeah.
change.
But
So
also,
it's like a blueprint.
yeah. Also, when something is actually imminent. Do you feel that? That
Yeah,
suddenly
right.
you feel somebody's going to ring you or something like that.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. You seem to be able to predict that, all right. That something's going to happen immediately, but not in the future, as it were.
Yeah, often
Or not
predictions
the
come in short term,
timing of
don't
it.
they? Like, you
Yes.
suddenly get a feeling, like you say,
Yes.
someone's going to
Yeah.
call me,
Yeah.
or something's happened to somebody, which might be telepathy, might not be prediction, but you still get the short term, don't you? And I think the short term future is easier to predict than the longer term.
Yes.
The short term,
Yeah.
there's certain thing, and even if you don't know anything about the particular, say a person comes to you, you know nothing about them, and you say, next week
Yeah.
you're going to buy a green car, and they buy a green car without realizing,
Yeah.
well, something happens. No, that's not a very good suggestion, but
No.
you suggest some, you say something and it happens out of the blue, sort of thing happens to them. And
Yes.
often
Yeah.
those things are wow, but then
Yeah.
20 years down the line there might be a sort of tendency you can pick up, but you might not see every single detail, because we have free will,
Yes.
and that
Yeah.
gives us the power to change things.
Yeah.
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 Do
So
you
Russia
think,
may
Craig,
not. Yeah.
do you think it's because the past, the present, and the future are really captured in the now? So if you think about it, this is the now. So if you want to look at the past, the present, and future in the now, you can see it. But if I shift a bit, it changes. If I shift a bit again, it changes, because every now has got a different position to it, if I want to look
Quality
at
to
it
it
that way.
too.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it
So
now has a quality, and I often wonder if I can, like you suggest, kind of shift our position within the now. Not only do I perhaps change the future, but could I also maybe have changed the past, even my
I think
memories
you
of the
do.
past?
I
You
think
know?
you do, because the past, present, and future is really like an energy structure, right? So if you shift something in the now, and every now you're shifting something, you break the structure of the past, which is like breaking karma, and you shift the structure of the future, which is part of the energy of that particular now. And so your future changes. And that's what karma clearing or prayers or whatever you do, good deeds, whatever you want to call it, does
Yeah, and I
in the
suppose
now.
I've thought about that too, because like ultimately, perhaps the enlightenment, as it were, the final stage of what we can achieve is actually when we wiped away past and we wiped away future, because it's all encompassed in this present
In the
moment.
now.
It all becomes the absolute now. So actually nothing is lost from the past or the future, but everything, the whole human story is kind of like in an instant, a forever instant,
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
yeah.
And even the moment of enlightenment, if you've heard people say this, is in the now.
Yeah.
You can literally shatter that structure of the karma in the now.
Yeah, exactly. It's timeless, it's timeless, without time, beyond time. It doesn't, and it means the whole exists. Not only is what happens when one enters the enlightenment, I believe, is that not only has my time changed, but the whole universe's time has changed relative to me. And that
That's right.
what's going on in the world, for a moment, in that enlightenment does not exist. It's put, path, the illusion popped, you know. And I think it's very, very hard to comprehend this type of thing, because to get our heads around it is very, very difficult, isn't it? Because we're thinking outside of time. But this is, in a way, what we see in things like quantum and things like that, isn't it, too? We see it all in that, you know. So, you know, and that's really high stuff, that is. I don't know, I don't think I don't think Baba Vanga understood that type of thing. She is a sort of an uneducated, let's say, person, and I think a lot of people get glimpses, psychic glimpses of things. But I think also, if we get to, like we're talking about here, the kind of the highest truths, as it were, you see the whole lot. Every person, as you enter that state of absolute awareness, or whatever we want to call it, because it's beyond description. It can't even be thought about, because it is so beyond the comprehension of our mind. But at that point, it's all there, the whole lot. Everything that's ever happened to me, everything that's ever happened to everybody, everything that's ever happened since the beginning, since the Big Bang, and everything whatever will happen, is all encompassed in that, which I think is almost being the point between, how can I say, relative existence and non-relative existence. Now, so you see, and you start talking about this, it sounds like bloody philosophers that got lost in their ideas again. But can you see what I mean? It's like, it's all there. I can see
what you mean.
It's all there in its seed. It's the seed of it's there, and even that seed goes, because pow, it's and it's beyond thought, and it's beyond personality, it's beyond memory, and yet nothing is lost, you know. Because the Buddhists talk about it like nirvana, don't they? Like a wiping out. It's the putting out of the flame. That's not the case. Buddha got it wrong, because nothing is lost. And I'm sure Buddha would say he's got it wrong, because it is beyond anything that we can comprehend in the normal sense of things. Right. Well, that's nice and simple. I'm sure everybody watching this will enjoy the simplicity of our answers there. Sorry. Any other thoughts about this?
But it's interesting what you were just talking about quantum theory, and we have the science, and we have all of the, you know, the experiments that have been done about whether, you know, light is a wave, or whether it's a particle. But when you read like the Indian scriptures, they understood life at that atomic level that we now know about because of science. They understood about that thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. So, you know, what you're saying is, it sounds complicated, but it's very simple as well, isn't it? They understood that thousands
I think that's right,
years.
Christine, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about the ultimate answers to the universe, the question, life, the universe and everything, it's the simplest thing you could possibly know. It's simplicity itself, because it's beyond all the complexities of all this thinking and form and everything. It's simplicity itself. And I suppose in many ways, the only way that, and this doesn't describe it, but it kind of is the closest word we could get to describing it, I think, is if it described it in a single word, I think it would say it was love. Because it's like oneness, it's like absolute, everything is as it should be. It's dissolving, it's giving up, it's surrendering. I think love, the word love kind of summarizes it as the closest word we could get. I mean, Buddha used the word compassion, but I just feel that feels so cerebral. Love feels a better word to describe it. Or in India they call it prem, don't they, or prema. But I think that's, you know, you could, single words could sum it up. Truth, you could even call it as well, couldn't you? Light, you could call it. Consciousness, you could call it. But none of them, eternity, you could call it. Absolute, you could call it. But none of them really can summarize or ever fully express the truth, or the what it is, because it cannot be conceived in thought.
That's right.
And like Elise was saying, these things are beyond time. And I think that's where we start to get into the interesting idea about, you know, what is time? What is this moment? What is the now? And does that now, which I think is a brilliant one, Elise, does that now have a quality to it? Because when I do things like when I do readings for people using the I Ching, I use the I Ching to find out what is the flavor of now for that person. What is the weather forecast, right? The spiritual weather forecast. What energy are surrounding you at the moment? What is the energy of the Tao at the moment in this present point in time? So that's coming at it from another angle with the Chinese thought. But I mean, this moment encompasses, from an individual point of view, it encompasses all the karma of our past, present, and what will happen to us in the future is in this very moment. It's not in the future, it's not in the past, it's in the now. And anything we do now has incredible power to change everything. So we all think we're powerless in the hands of fate, don't we? We all think we're in the hands of destiny and there's nothing we can do about it. But actually, all the seeds are in this present moment, like the way we've been talking
that's
here.
Right.
And,
that's right.
And we can change the lot.
Yeah, and that is why some of these predictions just don't happen, because we've changed it somehow. But talking about now,
that's very true. Very, very good, Pat. That's a good good point.
Yeah, but as soon as you say the word now, it's not now anymore, because
Exactly.
that's gone past. You know? If I say now, I've now said it a few seconds ago. It's a bit mind-blowing, really, isn't it?
Yeah. No. Ow. Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? So that could, like you say, you know, it's like that. I think there was I'm not quite sure how it worked. There was a story, I think, in Zen Buddhism about an animal passes through a gate. When does it pass through it? Because its nose passes through it, its body passes through it, its tail passes through it, but then the gap between its tail just passing the gate smaller. It never actually ever passes the gate in this sort of thinking. And it's the same with now. It's like smaller and smaller. You're never going to get to that now position because it cannot be measured, because it's tinier than tiny.
Right.
And yet it's
always
been now. You know?
I've wondered that about sound as well, because it starts as a wave and then it gets smaller and smaller until it can't be measured. But, you know, is it still there?
Yeah. I mean, even the dinosaurs knew about the now, because for them, when they were on the earth, it was now, you know, and their now and our now. What's the difference?
The same. Because when people say they're picking up vibrations from a house, are they actually feeling the sound waves that have just died down a little bit?
Yeah.
So it can't be measured. Are they actually still picking up those vibrations?
Yeah. Because, you know, I mean, we have, all of us, has a very slapdash understanding of what all this prediction business is about, really. Because, I mean, we're linking into what we're talking about here, this idea that there is kind of like a universal mind. But it's not like kind of clicking into the memory of existence, because you could say that's one way of describing it, or the memory of the future. Because we're still thinking in linear time. You know, there's the past, there's the future. We just look to the future bit. And the same, we remember the future like we remember the past. But when we do it, we haven't got to extend our minds to the future. We've got to bring our minds to the very, very moment that we're in, to the present, to the quality of the present moment. And I think that's what happens when we do clairvoyance, because all forms of clairvoyance, it's like, even when I'm connecting with the spirit world, my mind doesn't reach out and try to grab people in the spirit world. My brain doesn't go out there, it comes in here. And when I'm focused and I get closer and closer to my, whatever that minuscule bit that is the inside of me, the ultimate place of my consciousness, which is infinite ultimately, but it's an inward process to understand the rest, isn't it? And I think all of us that are interested in these psychic and clairvoyant things, that's what we do, you know. And like sometimes if I've got people who are training, their whole idea is that they feel like they're trying to reach out to get information. And I say, no, you don't reach out to try to get information. You look in and you'll find that person's information when you connect with someone. And I suppose it's in the same with all the psychic arts, you know, and, you know, not just psychic people. This is part of how we work, we function. Do you think?
Maybe you're correct 100% of the time, Craig, but it's all these pesky people with their thoughts that change what you've predicted.
That's right. I could probably, and you too, or any of us could probably say a whole load of things, but something gets in the way to change it. And I suppose you've got to say, thank goodness.
But I think Pat's right. I think a lot of these things can be predicted, but the collective consciousness can change things, you know, for good or possibly for bad. But yeah, I when I went to see Sharavana, one of his messages was about the way that we will change the world is everybody praying together. So, you know, I thought that was, you know, that's very much what we're talking about, isn't it? Like the collective goodwill or the collective focus of spiritual people will hopefully divert some of these dire things that have been, you know, predicted.
Yeah, I noticed that Baba Vanga also talked about a golden age, and I think most of the prophets have talked about that, and I think probably that's the one thing that's inevitable, because ultimately, surely it's all moving in that direction, because all of us are developing spiritually. I hopefully am a little bit more spiritually more developed than when I was first born, and that's how I've developed, and I think others develop. I don't think we ever fall. I think even those that have done bad things in the world have kind of moved forward slightly in their spirituality, even the bad people. And everything is moving to greater awakening ultimately. And I think it's inevitable that with that will come golden ages, you know, as individuals as well.
Yeah, some of my family are saying they can feel it's imminent. They're just sitting there waiting for it to happen. They can feel its imminence now.
And are your family Pat into psychic things and all the spirituality, or are they ordinary sort of people?
Some of them are, not all of them. A couple of them are mediums.
But others say just ordinary, regular guys, as it were.
Yeah.
I think the world is thinking that. Yeah. It's like we can all feel it coming, can't we? We can feel there's something. Yes. I suppose perhaps it's a reaction to the terrible things that we see in the world. We think to ourselves, oh, there's got to be something better, and you could say it's wishful thinking. But I think it's more than that. There's a gut feeling that things are ready to change, probably through difficulties, because I think there's a feeling of that with it too. But ultimately, there's going to be something good, you know, and that good, you know, people always think golden age, that's when everything's lovely and we all dance around and everything's fine. It's not like that. It's what happens is it happens to each individual one at a time. We wake up one at a time. We don't all collectively wake up like some sort of great revelation and we all wake up and now we understand, let's have a golden age. Even in the darkest times of an individual can be in the golden age. And in fact, the darkest times are the easiest time to wake up, because the power is stronger at that time. They say even a mantra can wake you up in the age of Kali Yuga, and I think it's that we understand that and have faith in the trust in the fact that, you know, what we do can wake us up. We can make massive progress individually, and we should be grateful to be born in these difficult times because of that. Because this is a time of quickening for us. Yeah, you're all nodding your heads. So we've sussed it out. We got the answers. There it is. No more. We don't need to do any more of these Zooms. we cracked it. Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, karma is we talked about now. I mean, nothing exists except this present moment. But the thought that you had 3 seconds ago has karmic implications, doesn't it? So even though it's in the past, that thought, whether it was good or bad, there's karmic residue from that. So that's kind of like the rider, isn't it?
Yeah.
To all of being in the now.
And that's also like in your interest in astrology, Christina, isn't it? I mean, it's all written there in astrology. We're born into this world pure beings, and but then a kind of a chain is put around our neck with our karma, which is maybe it smells nice or maybe it smells foul, but that is what is going to be going to determine what's going to happen in our life, really, because we brought that karmic chain with us. And astrology kind of gives a little bit of a revelation of what the qualities of that are likely to be. And in a way, this kind of contradicts what me and Elise were talking about earlier on there, really, in some ways, because we say everything's in the moment, isn't it? And every moment has a quality. But also there's this other chain of karma that is keeping us from that knowledge of being able to change everything, as it were. See what I mean? It's like that karma pulls us away from the power of the now. Because in this moment, in the now, we have absolute control over everything that can possibly ever happen to us. We can completely change everything that happens. But of course, we lose that power because our karma pulls us away from it. Am I right? Am I wrong?
That's
I
right.
don't know.
You're right. It's an energy structure, a memory, in a way, right? That's what karma is.
Yeah.
It holds you back. It prevents you from liberating yourself from that structure that is around you. So you keep doing a certain thing all the time, or you keep meeting someone who's wrong for you in love relationships, for example, and so on and so forth. But if you could just wake up now, you could make your life what you wanted it to be.
That's right. We can actually cut those chains that bind us. That's the difference, and that's the glory of it. And actually, sometimes we can get moments, I think, when we are able to transcend our karma, when we're in certain states, and actually we are suddenly in control of our life in ways that we could never have imagined. And then I think we fall back into a kind of a sleep sometimes, and we get back into the same old patterns and routines, which is the remnants of karma from past and karma we've made in this life. But I think the bad news is that every single action and thought that we have will catch up with us, good or bad, every single one. But the good news is that we can change those patterns of thoughts, and every single good thought and love thought we've had can also catch up with us, and even perhaps stop some of those negative ones and counteract them. And just like, like you've got headphones on there at the moment, Elise, if the sound counter, if they knock out the background noise, you send a second noise out to break the old noise, don't you? That's how they work. Right. They work by neutralizing one noise with another. And I suppose good karma works a bit like that too, that we neutralize the bad karma, and we will hopefully create good karma. So it's easy. We can all have happy lives. We just need to think good, be good, act lovingly, and it all come to us, every single bit, without any effort, because it won't require effort. It just requires, I suppose, a loving heart,
And now.
Yeah, in the now. And like we said, we tried to describe it, didn't we? We said, what is it? And I suppose the closest word we can say to it is love. And I suppose, what's the most powerful thing we have at our disposal? Love. God, we can do anything with it. And I'm not talking about soppy sort of romantic love, I'm talking about, this sort of like powerful divinity love, as it were, that embraces all forms of love, but is kind of transcendent and is kind of happy and cheerful and light and easygoing and at peace. Yep. And is full of truth, and would always put everything else ahead of you. It gives up the fruits. I mean, that's, I suppose, what it's all about, isn't it? We're gonna grind to a stop here because we're getting too close to the truth. We better come in with some nonsense to see if we can change
the other thing about all of that, though, is this concept of non-attachment. I think that is absolutely key. I think, what you're talking about, Craig, sounds like a utopia, and most of us are sitting here thinking, oh my God, I can never do that. But I think it's the attachment thing that causes the most problem, isn't it? I mean, if you can have non-attachment, that then basically stops you from worrying about the past and, you know, being anxious about the future, doesn't it? It's the attachment thing, I think, which is the biggest problem in all of this.
Yeah, I suppose it is really. Again, if you look at the Buddhist way, it's desire is the root of all suffering. Actually, desire is attachment, isn't it? Desire is that you want something. And also I find the greatest problems in the world tend to come from other people, whether that's my karma or not. But the people I always find the most difficult ones, the ones that cause the most trouble, I always think are the control freaks, you know, the narcissists out there,
Yes.
you know, and these are people that have a big attachment issues that often based on fear, you know. And in our own lives, in smaller ways and in larger ways, it is the attachment thing that can cause a problem. But, you know, take the idea of love and take the idea of attachment, you know, love often is an attachment because, you know, there's people we love, there's things we love. Even if we love God, as it were, if you think of it in a concept like a God, that's still an attachment. Non-attachment often can feel very cold. It can feel destructive. It can feel it's a no, netty, not this, you know. But I think to understand attachment, I think it's one of these things that's, in my mind, I feel it's kind of like ambiguous, because in order to love, you have to be unattached. But love is an attachment at the same time. And if you take it into a divine and higher sense, it's like to be and not to be at the same time, you know. To be unattached is to not be. To be is to be attached. So when they say to be or not to be, that is the question. It certainly is. But it's not one or the other. Unfortunately, it has to be both. It has to be simultaneous.
I think the more inclusive you are of people, things, the less binary you are, the more non-attached you are. Just think about it. If you loved all and everything and everyone, as some great people have done in human history, you are closer and closer to that ideal state of non-attachment.
Mm-hmm. You're free.
It's inclusiveness. You're free. That's right.
Yeah.
It's how inclusive you've got to be. The whole universe, I suppose, if you're really there.
Because people that try to control their world, or try to control others, or bind themselves to a joy, as Blake said, he who binds himself to a joy doth the winged life destroy, said William Blake. I love that one. But he who kisses his joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. I got a word or two wrong there, but the idea is to allow it all to be, that freedom of the soul, isn't it, really? And I think we create our own suffering so much. It's like you know, it's like pain is mandatory because that comes in the world, but suffering is voluntary. And I think we have to sort of kind of and we get over it often by letting go. Don't you think that's another thing, that this is what the answer perhaps is, the word letting go?
Yeah.
And aren't most people in the world scared to let go at all? Look at Putin. Scared to let go of his power. What a horrible world he lives in, you know.
Oh dear.
Far from the truth.
Very deep, isn't it?
I was thinking that it's a very deep discussion this week.
Yeah, good one though. I love talking like this. The nice thing, the thing I love about these Zoom talks that we have together is that you don't get chances or even time or opportunities in life to talk to people about these things very often, do you? You know, right. And yet it's amazing how so many people are thinking like this. You know. You know, we're thinking about things like this, and yet our lives are so tied up. We're so lost in the hubbub and the hurly-burly of life that we completely lose track with the most important things of all. And we stop to think about it. We can go away from discussions like this and maybe see all the things of the world in a slightly different way, which is where we fall into the trap of the illusion, isn't it, really? Because you know, we're all of us, when you, I find when you had a really deep discussion with people, or watched or even listened to a sort of deep discussion where people watched us, you know, you go away feeling slightly energized and seeing it all in a new sort of way. But then you start to fall back into the sleep again. And next thing you know, I'm hammering my horn in the car, getting cross with the slow driver in front of me, you know, and we're back in the illusion. But it's like, we got to wake up, you know. I remember in Aldous Huxley's book, Island, he wrote Brave New World, which he's famous for, but he wrote this utopian idea in Ireland. And they trained all the parrots on the island to say, be here now, wake up, right? And I think that was not a bad idea. Perhaps we should train all the birds in the world to shout out, be here now and wake up. Remind ourselves. Or maybe have it tattooed on my forehead, so when I look in the mirror.
So you wake up. Yeah, you'd have to do it backwards, wouldn't you? So
Yeah.
you read it.
I'm sure Jane will love that.
Oh yeah, she's all for having me fully tattooed.
You get some funny looks, I think.
Yeah, you would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be better forms of tattoos, wouldn't it? Reminders of spiritual messages to yourself, rather than cool things or demons drawn all over yourself. I think it would be quite good to have spiritual messages. That would be quite good, you know. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're pretty much at the end now, don't you? I think that was really interesting, inspired discussion. Started off talking about Baba Vanga, started talking about the nature of the world and how it works, and ended up solving it all. We've sorted it all out. So we can say to the world, we've done it. You know, we've sussed it all out, guys. Anyway, so thanks for joining us. I was going to say goodbye to everybody who's joined us on YouTube here, and say thanks for joining us. If you're interested in the sort of discussions we had today, you can come and join us on YouTube, here on the Zoom, in the Patreon pages. Have a look in the description below of this video. And the messages I've flashed up on the screen all the way through this. And yeah, so you can come and join us and become part of it, or even just come into the Zoom sessions and watch us as well. You don't always have to be on screen, because there's a number here that you know haven't got their videos on, which is fine. So see you soon. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now. Happiness is. Now, you've not watched it, but I'd be interested in what your take is of what do you think happiness is, and how do people achieve it?
Happiness is being peaceful with yourself and getting on with life and enjoying people, enjoying the garden, feeling contented. And happiness is something that comes within us, not just outside of us. Happiness is, I find happiness as love, caring, and being contented.
Okay. And do you think there's any permanent form of happiness? I mean, when happiness is taken away for people, sort of like when we do readings with people and they've had a death or lost somebody, they obviously look at the world and see it as a completely different place, an unhappy place. What would you say to people who've had things torn away? Is there any form of finding a permanent happiness in life?
Happiness, once again, will be people surrounding us, giving us love and picking us up to comfort us and to be there for us. And like life, we're going to experience suffering, because how will we know what happiness is if we haven't suffered in this life?
Well, that's true. You have to suffer to know happiness. And when we see, I mentioned on my talk that I said about when we saw Sharavana Baba, he always says to us, "Are you happy?" Right? Why do you think he says that? Because he says it to lots of people. Because
happiness is the essence of the soul. Happiness is who we are. Happiness is really for good things happening around us that makes us happy. We can be happy, experience good food. We can be happy because people have done well for themselves. We can be happy if we have a new house. We can be happy for others. It's an unselfish act.
But really, the ultimate happiness, I said in my video, was really the realization that that is the absolute center of one's self.
Atom.
It's the
atom.
very core of one's being. Would you agree with that? And I think that's why people like Sharavana and Sai Baba say, "Are you happy?" Because
Well-
they're saying, "Are you in touch with the absolute in yourself?"
Well, happiness is that you've reached a sort of higher, I'd say, a higher self-awareness that makes you happy.
Yeah.
Because if you're on a spiritual path, it doesn't make people happy, then they come off that. So happiness has to be, well, as a woman, strong, confident, and happy with people around you, happiness within the heart.
Well, there we go. And I hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoy this channel, I'm going to tell you again, please don't forget to follow us. Click that little bell thing. And, you know, if you like what you see with our videos, go and have a look at our website, find out about our books, find out about the readings and things we do. There's lots more there, and you can ask questions on some of the articles and so forth. And don't forget, follow this channel. Do share it with your friends if you would. Please post it on groups if you find it interesting, on your Facebook groups and so forth. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.